Welcome to this The Truth of the Light event. I am spiritual teacher, healer, and life coach James Valentine. We have a awesome guest today. I consider this woman a mentor. Though I've just kind of met with her and talked with her this past week, her words are very enlightening, very encouraging, always on point. She's even sparked my mind just in my conversations with her. Before I go into that, I just kind of want to make an announcement to my group and those that follow what God has purposed that I do. This is probably going to be my last interview for a while, I think, because I really want to concentrate on direction I feel that God is leading me in creating a group for people who are single, married, um, in relationships, parenting, single parents, people who are co-parenting, and just I want to be able to. I feel led to do seminars, webinars, conferences, workshops to really help people be able to navigate that. Even in the awakening community, there are people who talk about loneliness, and I really want to kind of address those things and have guests who will come alongside me and address those things for the awakening community. So, having said that, I am bringing on the lovely Barbara Symons. All right. Hi, Barbara.
Hey there.
I am I cannot say it enough. I said it when we spoke. I said it just a few minutes ago. I cannot, this is exciting for me because you've meant so much to my journey. Um, it kind of started with you. I wanted to kind of share my story, uh, and I came across Dr. G. And as I shared my story with her of being in deliverance ministry and having been a minister for over 20 years, she said you need to listen and you need to reach out to Barbara Symons. I think I sent you a friend request around that time, and I really started listening to your interviews, and it's just I kept having so many wow moments, like wow, that's what I'm experiencing. That's what I'm feeling. That's the best way I've ever heard it put, as I've listened to you. So I'm excited to have you on. I've had a lot of people reach out to me, like, send me friend requests just because I'm somewhat connected to you. So we're going to get started. I am interviewing Barbara Symons. She is a minister, teacher, speaker, and writer, and this is the root that broke the pot. I love that. When you said that to me earlier this week, I was like, I love that. And as I was thinking about the title, I was like, it just came to me, the root that broke the pot. Before we get started, explain that. Explain the root that broke the pot.
The first time that I heard that was from a friend of mine, and she had listened to Joel Osteen.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing I don't know, a series about blooming where you're planted. But basically what he said is there comes a time where what is inside of you becomes too big
Yeah.
for the system that you're in.
Yeah.
That it's the root breaking the pot. And of course, we know through our background that root is Christ.
Right.
And so a lot of people that are finding themselves disenfranchised from the systems that they were even raised in from adolescence on up, that system has become too small. And
Yeah.
so the structure somewhat breaks. And I think you and I talked about how even in the womb, a baby, if that place never got too small, then the baby would break free. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so church and the systems and the structures are all good and they serve a purpose. But there comes a time when who and what you are eclipses the size of the space, the conscious space that you find yourself within.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And, I kind of introduced you based on our conversations and kind of my research that I've done. But kind of like when the apostles asked Jesus, who do men say I am? Who is Barbara Symons?
Wow. Well, I'm a wife of Lyle for 40 years this year.
Oh, wow. Great. Congratulations.
Thank you. Mother of three boys, Ryan, Chris, and Keith, and five grandchildren, Cole, Caitlin, Cody, Cooper, um, Lila. And
Right.
yeah, I just enjoy life here in Texas, and I live in a very conservative community, so I'm underground a lot.
Okay.
I read and I study a good bit, and a little bit of an artist. And
Okay.
that's who I am.
I think I was on your page and I kept seeing these, I don't want to say figurines, but that's the only word that I have. You make those?
Yeah, I wrap stones inside
Wow.
wire. Yeah.
Okay.
And we have the scripture that says that, if you don't, if they don't worship me, then even the stones will cry out.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Everything here has vibration, and everything here serves us.
Right.
So I found great joy in wrapping them, and so it's a little cottage business that I have. And it's like therapy, really.
I love it. I can see that. I spent some time out in nature yesterday, just kind of taking it all in, so I can, and that has enormous energy, just kind of being out there. So, yeah, I can imagine that's very much the case. So let's kind of go into the journey. Let's go into the journey. If I have this correct, you were ordained first of all, you were a minister for over 40 years, correct?
Mentalism for 43 years.
Okay.
Deliverance ministry in the 90s.
Right.
Ordained in 2008. I was completely out of organized religion at that time, but I was ordained by Christ Fellowship International.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for where you are now, most of us kind of have followed, what you teach. How did you go from what you call Christian fundamentalism, to where you are now? How does that shift? And where did that shift take place?
I'd say that I had a little bit of a spiritual breakdown.
Okay.
It was 1998, and I was having a discussion with a really good close friend, and we had a friend in common. Kind of hard to follow here, but a friend in common who had a sister that was put into the hospital and was dying.
Oh, wow.
My friend said to me, "Well, do you think that she's saved?" And I went to reply and to give my canned answer, and my mind completely went blank. And I sat there and I just looked at her, and I thought, am I having a stroke? I mean, what's happening to me? I couldn't figure it out, because I couldn't access what saved meant. It was like it was no longer a part of my vocabulary. And so I looked around and I saw a table, and I said, okay, there's a table, so that word is there, and there's a chair, so that word is there, but what does saved mean? And it wasn't there. It was like someone took that program off my computer, like if you were to erase Word or PowerPoint or whatever, I couldn't access it anymore. And I felt like I was floating a little bit, and I looked down at my hand, and I saw an age spot or some wrinkles, and I thought, am I saved? And my friend said, what? And I said, are you saved? And she said, what's wrong with you? And I said, is any of us saved? Because this looks like it's aging.
Yeah.
So what does saved mean? And so at that point in time, I had large blocks of my teaching, of my go-to dogma, just begin to disappear. So I was almost forced to start to see things differently, because I couldn't. It was like, I call it like my, and I'm going to date myself here, like my computer going back to the blue screen and the DOS prompt, where I just couldn't access it. So I really didn't have a choice except to see things differently. So I began to really question, all right, what does it mean to be saved? Because it obviously doesn't mean raising your hand and walking an aisle and escaping hell, going to heaven. And so that's when it really started to change from that pivotal event that day.
Okay. Interesting. Now, when I think about Paul and how the scales fell from his eyes, and before he came on the scene with most of the New Testament, Galatians says he went off to Arabia for 3 years, and I'm assuming to get answers for what he was experiencing, what was happening to him. Where did you go to get answers?
Within.
Okay.
I really did. I can remember one time, it was during this time, and I had gotten very sick. I had 2 ear infections, a bacterial infection in my throat, a sinus infection, and bronchitis, all at the same time. I thought I was dying.
Right.
I was in so much pain, and I can remember going up into my husband's whiskey and getting him drinking a couple of shots of whiskey. All I did was get drunk. I still had the pain. But the next day, I'm high fever even, and I went into the shower, and I was just letting the steam hit me.
Yeah.
And I was questioning some things about Satan and about the angels, the fallen angels, and I heard a voice in the shower that said this: "You are the stars." And I thought, man, I wonder how high my temperature is. I'm hearing things, and so I said, okay, I'm going to take for granted that I'm hearing a divine voice. And so I answered, and I said, "What do you mean I'm the stars?" And the voice said, "Read." And I knew that I was to go to Revelation and read chapter 12, where it talks about these disenfranchised angels that fell.
Right.
And when I looked at the scripture, it said not a third of the stars. Actually, it said stars, not angels. A third of the stars.
Yeah.
It doesn't say a third. It says the third part of the stars fell. So, number one, I realized I was the stars that fell. It was the third part of me that fell into a place of disunion. Wow. So all of my journey, coming back full circle to your question, where did I go? I read books, yes.
Right.
But the most profound times were when I would just listen to what this voice was speaking to me. And I was chasing after that thread that was pulled from my former fabric of understanding, and I would chase it to see where it was going and why. And my dogma began to disappear. My programming.
And I share a similar experience. A lot of what I receive, I just would journal it. Like I did read books as well, but sometimes I'd be up at 2 a.m. in the morning and just something would come to me, and I need to get this down.
Right.
Yeah. I get it. Now, with what you were experiencing and what was being revealed to you, you had people who knew you. You had people who knew you a different way as reverend or minister. How did the church respond to you?
Not well. Well, and Christianity requires consensus for them to be safe. I did.
Video.
Were people that disagreed with me, man, I kicked them to the curb, and I'm just reaping what I sowed, now. But, there's a place of security when you have so many people that believe like you.
Yeah.
So as I made the mistake of trying to subjugate somebody else's path by proselytizing them into my new way of thinking.
Wow.
The absolute wrong thing to do, because what that says is you're wrong and I'm right. And I wasn't wrong. In my journey for 43 years, and all the stuff that I believed, it wasn't necessarily wrong. It was part of my path, and it brought me to where I am.
Yes.
And I'm free. So how can I say to somebody else, you shouldn't be there? But it's taken a long time to get over that pain.
Okay.
To a place of appreciation. It didn't happen overnight. I hope others can, glean from that and recognize that they're not wrong.
Right.
We are all viewing a different part of the proverbial elephant, so to speak, the tusk and the ear and the tail and the trunk. it's all beautiful parts of the whole.
Yeah, yeah. I love that imagery. I think I either read that from you or heard you saying that about touching the elephant and so forth and so on. Um, I love that you. I love you saying that because I remember I had a very good friend that I wanted to present the different argument about what it meant to be awakening, and it's only it was only that one person. But I see what you're saying now about trying to proselytize someone who is right where they need to be.
And
It's right.
there's a scripture that says, "You travel the seas to
Yeah,
win one
yeah,
proselyte, and when you do convert him, he is twice as much a son of hell as yourself."
yeah,
And to me, hell is just lower thinking and living according to mortal, laws and standards, according to the age where our bodies decay and, all of that. So this is what we do. We go and we take away people's culture and we try to make them just like us, two
right.
full of hell or lower living. So yeah, that was a big one. That was a big one for me to learn.
Now, for me, and I want your experience. For me, I felt some sense of fear, actually, because I've now, having been conditioned in a heaven and in hell, I was like, what if I'm wrong? What if what I'm experiencing is wrong and I'm going to end up going to hell? What did you face any fears as you transitioned
You know,
into?
I remember some questions, but for the most part, I felt free. I was relieved. I think you've heard me say that. Here's this God that we serve that tells us to love and to forgive our enemies while he tortures his. What kind of father is that? What kind of
Yeah,
God is that? And
yeah,
how was my thinking so skewed to receive that type of a father? So when I let that go, one day I had an experience that I describe in my book where I let Jesus go. I let Jesus go. And it was based on the scripture that said, it's better for you if I go away. So I went ahead, instead of taking that literally, like he was going to the cross, I thought everything that I've been taught about this person, everything, I'm going to let it go. And this benevolent being, whatever form it is, whatever form divinity takes, is more than capable of helping me if I step into error.
yeah,
That was extremely liberating to me. So I just imagined this big old chalkboard with all of my dogma, a big old eraser, and I just erased it all. And guess what? I felt peace. And
yeah,
just like the scripture says. So I had to let, my Christian idea of who and what Jesus was, I had to let that go. And I did in one day, sitting on my back porch. I said, okay,
yeah,
I'm letting you go.
yeah. Wow. So, and that's a great segue into this. You know, does Christianity help facilitate the very thing that it suggests to be the answer to? Fear and guilt and control. And if so, in what way is Christianity doing that?
All religious systems, a lot of, okay, there we go. All systems that are based in fear help us. It's just like the structure of the womb. Even a person that's involved in a relationship that's abusive, that's
Hmm.
all things, light and dark, serve us. And so the religious structure, I think one of the main things that it gives to us is a dichotomy to look at. Even today, I've got a friend that was my friend for 25 years, and you may have read this on my Facebook page there.
Mhm.
I mean, we traveled together. We took vacations together.
Yeah.
Her husband was my best friend. And she recently came to a remodel that we did in our master bath, and she saw a statue, an art piece
Mhm.
of a Buddha giving a hand signal for peace. What's wrong with that?
Right. Right.
25-year-long relationship because of that. And so I look at that, and I look at some of the structure, and I see now that it's a plumb line for me to recognize the boundaries that it tried to impose on me, which were good while I was growing, just like a fetus in a womb. It's good. It's a good place to be. You're fed and you're nourished. But there's a time where when we try to drag systems, even relationships, past their season of relevance, it never goes well.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing you hit on was something that I noticed in studying the Bible. Not so much the Word of God, but the Bible. But when you look at some of Paul's writings are not original Christian thoughts. They're, some of his stuff he borrowed from Seneca, a pagan, Roman. And every time we look in Romans and see, for we know that all things work together for good. So he looked at other faith, other religions, to form what Christianity calls the Bible. He mentions poets that are pagan poets, and so when someone, and that actually freed me to study outside of just the Bible, outside of Christianity. And even looking at where Paul grew up at in Tarsus, it was a hotbed for all kinds of knowledge, and where people conjugated together and shared things like what Buddha would say, or things like that. So that as a Christian, that liberated me to be able to step outside that box. But obviously, Awakening has done so much more.
What the crux of the matter is here is that we take. And yes, Paul did that, and he did journey, and there's nothing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But we have been taught that if we don't follow the in between 38 and 41,000 different and disagreeing Christian sects, that we're going to miss out, because Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but by me. Yeah. We don't know what that means. The way is what Jesus modeled. Not even what Paul modeled. Paul was trying to help bridge the gap between the last age and the impending age.
Yeah.
So he said, if someone is sinning, don't have lunch with them.
Right.
But Jesus did. Yeah. Because he embodied the kingdom age.
Yeah.
So look at the way of Jesus, because he was like, I call it like a bomb dropped in the middle of the Bible. He manifested a whole different age, other than Paul even.
Yeah.
The miraculous. He performed so many miracles, and yet, 40, 70 years later, when Timothy is sick, Paul says, dude, drink some wine if you got a stomach problem. So where did the miraculous go? And it's because Jesus manifested a kingdom and age of non-judgment, of compassion, of love. And yet we are still in the age that precedes the kingdom, which says judge, which says separate, which says all of these things. We have to go back to the way of Christ.
Yeah.
And that way is not raising a hand and walking an aisle and accepting Jesus into your heart. It is being love expressed in the earth, and anybody can do that. Jesus wasn't a Christian. He didn't come to start a Christian religion, and he didn't. We did that.
Right.
It still serves us, but if we want to truly progress in the things of God and the kingdom, then we have to go back to the pattern. And the pattern is love, non-judgment. Those are principles that will help us transition out of this age and into the next age. But if we continue to say, oh no, you're not like me, are you of Paul or are you of Apollos? Paul said, when you do that, when you say I'm First Baptist, I'm of God, I'm this or I'm that, are you not carnal?
Yeah. That's yeah. That's Barbara. That was extremely powerful. That was extremely powerful, and makes all the sense in the world. And as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking Jesus would have been considered a New Age teacher.
Absolutely. And the way to the Father, the Father, source, whatever you want to call it, when you go back to the root definition of the word, it means progenitor, and that means from the source of all.
Yeah.
Everything is inside of us. Jesus said that the divine doesn't dwell in buildings made with hands. He dwells in you. You are the temple. So the Father is likewise this progenitor, this source of all, this ability to create. Anything that you want is inside of you. But as long as you remain egocentric, that way is blocked. You must follow the way of love and love unconditional, and that allows you access to the source. Period.
And that was something as a Christian I used to question. When it came to other faiths and other religions that were teaching love, I would often think, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? But it all encapsulates in the word just love, just being love and being without judgment. And I love that. I absolutely love that, because in Christianity, it says judge not lest ye be judged, but that's what we do.
Right.
That's what's done.
That's the admonishment of the kingdom age. That's what Jesus said. The judgment with which you judge another will fall on your own head.
Right.
Amazing if we could just get this principle. But what Christianity does is they are under the law.
Yeah.
You put yourself under one of the law, and you are required in keeping all of it.
Yeah.
And their system of belief is according to the knowledge of good and evil. So they're going to see good and evil. Period. If someone is acknowledging evil, it's because that's the tree they're eating from. And so someone said to me recently, well, what would it be like if we didn't judge? What would it be like if we just let, people murder and kill and steal and, everything else? And my answer is this, and you'll know this, and everyone listening will know this. If you are called not to judge, then don't judge.
Yeah.
If you are called to judge, then judge well.
Yeah.
The kingdom is going to start slowly as a mustard seed, and it's going to gradually overtake the consciousness. But what happens is in this process, again, is you start slowly so that you build a momentum, so that you gain ground. And so as we learn not to judge after the knowledge of good and evil, what happens then is the shift in power, the balances begin to change. And the more people that don't judge, the less that evil is a part of our society. Because the focus on judgment and evil is what creates the world that we live in. Is it not said that you are God's? You have this divine progenitor, the source of all, inside of you.
Right.
Son of perdition, the ego, presently sits on the throne, so it creates the world that we see.
Yeah.
Complete with disaster and disease and whatever, because we're creating according to the ego. We are wandering in the wilderness. There comes a time when an awakening people will get it, that because I am dwells in here. If I focus on something and I provide the emotional currency for whatever I'm thinking about, it will be.
Wow.
Without fail. So there will be a company that awakens and begins to cease judgment, and they will begin to see and reap true change in the world. Because how can love fail?
Yeah. I agree. Love is the most powerful force in the universe when you understand what it is. But I think a lot of what we call love is not love. It's, Eckhart talks about it as egoic wanting. But I agree. So how does Christians become a part of this, what you call elective brainwashing? Talk about elective brainwashing. I like that.
Well, that's what I did. And I can only speak for myself, but I sure did see it all around me. Mm-hmm. When I was a little girl, I could feel when I would walk into a meeting and they were singing and worshiping and praising God, I could feel waves of energy just wafting over me, and it was powerful. It was visceral. It was palpable. All of those words, I could feel this great presence. And then the preacher would get up and he would talk about the rapture and being left behind and going to hell and all of these. So we have this divine dilution going on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the potency of the Spirit is there, but then there's this mixture of fear that is wound in it.
Mm.
And another thing is, you know, when we see the miraculous,
Yeah.
James, being a deliverance minister right along there with you,
Yeah.
we saw, didn't we?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
I mean, I even saw the bone structure of a skull change shape.
Wow.
We saw we deaf ears open. We saw amazing things.
Yeah.
And it's because of the miracles. The miracles are validated by whatever system presents them.
Mm-hmm.
So the system that we find ourselves within is validated through the miracles. That's what I should have said.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So we find ourselves in the midst of, well, that miracle happened, so this is right.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
so we have a mixture and a blending of error and truth.
And that's another thing I noticed, Barbara, that miracles have been done by, you know, people have experienced miracles in other religions, paganism and so forth and so on, you know, and so it almost asks the question, which makes which one right? But it's just, it's, as you're saying, it validates in error, it kind of validates, you know, a certain position. Let me ask you this. Let me shift here for a second. Is there a literal heaven and hell?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
See, the reason I say that is I had a friend
Mm-hmm.
who came to me, and she was my mentor in the 1990s. Powerful woman, raised the dead, James. And she came to my house 3 or 4 years back and said to me, you know, Barbara, you can't say there's no hell because I've been there. You can't say there's no Satan because I've stood toe to toe with him.
Okay.
And she just looked at me and I said, you know, heaven, hell, Satan, Jesus, all of these things will appear externally as long as you need them to.
Mm.
They are unseen principles of consciousness that appear externally so that the ego, which is who's large and in charge, the son of perdition, can learn by them. So the people that die and go to hell, they're dreaming the dream.
Yeah.
They're in duality. They're still in that system that recognizes good for evil. And so we'll eventually awaken.
Yeah.
And we all do, and we recognize that all of those things, the wilderness, the rock that Moses struck, the departing of the Red Sea, you know, David, all those things are part of our conscious journey in divinity growing up inside the container. You know, we talk about the virgin birth.
Mm-hmm.
You mind if I skip?
No. Go ahead. Right here. Go ahead.
So when I started to see, this is what happened to me when you say, where did I go? When I started to see things different, I just, you know, I took a look at what the virgin birth was, and I questioned, well, did this happen historically?
Mm-hmm.
Or does it mean something different? And what I came to see is that divinity, Carl Sagan said, if you wish to create an apple pie from scratch, you must first not get a stove, not get a recipe. You must first create the universe.
Mm.
Powerful. And so what that says is divinity, who is energy, God, source, whatever you want to term it, and labels are so dividing.
Yeah.
It's energy. It means that if it walked in the room right now and wanted to pat me on the head or have a cold drink of water or pet a dog or smell a baby's newly laundered hair, it could not do it. It desired expression, experience, and manifestation in matter, and you are the vehicle from which it does. And so it created the physical universe, the material universe, and it put itself inside the human DNA. And it was born of a virgin. Never before had divinity found a means to penetrate the DNA molecule, and it did. And we were called Mary. Blessed are we.
Yeah.
And divinity came to this knowing from before the foundation of the world and said, you're going to be overshadowed by a holy thing, and you're going to give birth to the Christ. And Mary said, be it unto me as you have spoken. Let it be. And it is. All that is has wrapped itself inside of us, our flesh and blood, in the swaddling of our flesh and blood, our beautiful biology, and is growing up within the garden. So we are that story. It didn't happen to one man and one woman, but all. If you choose to see it as a singular event, it will bring you to a level in consciousness, but it will not bring you to perfection, because the mysteries are hidden in plain sight.
So let me understand this correctly, Barbara, because I've always was taught that God can do whatever he wants to do. So you're saying there's limitations to God, to divine, to divinity?
I'm not sure I caught that. Where did I?
No, I'm saying
Inside of us?
No. You're saying that, well, I was always taught that God can do whatever he wants to do. You know, he can do whatever he wants to do. But you're saying that he needs us or he to be able to. And I love that. And I'm bringing that out for a reason because
that's us. We're the helpmate.
Yeah. But we're often taught that, and for me, it's brought out in, I think it's John 15, where it talks about where the branches, he's divine. The source has to flow through us, but we are the one that produces the fruit. So it's like we need the divinity as much as divinity needs us to experience.
We are the leading edge of the material domains.
Yeah.
Biology is.
Yeah.
So, when it talks about, and so there's this synergy that takes place when you couple the divine and man. That's what Emmanuel means. Joy to the world, the Lord has come, let earth receive her king. The divine has found a way to penetrate biology and is now finding expression through us. And so when we awaken to this, when we awaken to who and what we are and the abilities that we carry, then the classroom comes to an end. And we migrate and navigate into the age to come. Paul said, you know what? I want to tell you about Melchizedek in Hebrews chapter 5. I want to tell you about the power of an immortal life. I want to tell you about an immortal being who does not die, who lives eternally. But you know what? I can't tell you because you're babes, because you have drank milk. Meat is reserved for those who are of full age, having had their senses exercised to discern good from evil.
Right.
That tells me there's a purpose for eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. There's a purpose for us to sit in this environment of mortality, to incubate in death. Just like a seed that's dropped, it is dropped from a mature source, a seed. It goes into the ground, it dies, it germinates, it accesses all the treasures of darkness, minerals, and it gets a strong root structure, and then it turns and it breaks the plane of the earth. That's our journey. That's divinity's journey into humanity. Divinity surrendered itself to baptism. That's what baptism means.
Okay.
Water represents dense human consciousness, and so when we go under the waters of baptism, that is divinity surrendering its immortal status, the lamb slain from before the foundation of the world, becoming mortal, holding divine breath under the waters until the day of awakening, where it comes up and comes out of the waters. In the same pattern is communion. Yeah. The bread is broken. Jesus said, I'm the bread that came down from heaven, the Christ, from an immortal point, from divine source. And he broke his immortal status and he was swallowed up, the Christ, us, of death. So when we're given this ritual to do, this breaking of the bread and the swallowing of the wine, which means we become, our light essence becomes slowed down to be congealed light, which is blood.
Mm-hmm.
And it said, do this in remembrance of me, of Christ, which is you. Do this. So we do this ritual where we take this broken bread, we swallow it, it goes down into death, and it stays there covered in blood. That's our journey.
Yeah.
So remember our eternal and immortal status, because when we incarnate and we become melded with a human being, we are taking this journey with them to learn how to navigate and to explore the material domains. And so we forget who we are. So we're given a ritual, something perfunctory to perform again and again and again, to recognize that we are the ones that have taken the journey. That consciousness that is growing up inside of us is now beginning to take over the garden.
Yeah.
And helpmate in the human ego being absolutely necessary for us. Absolutely.
Yeah, my friend Tanya had, kind of gave me a different perspective on the ego, because I think we look so much, or so many people look at the ego as getting rid of it and so forth and so on, but it serves a purpose.
Absolutely.
It serves a purpose. So the Bible, is this something that should be taken literally or figuratively? What should we just look at it as all allegory, or how should we see the Bible?
Literally or figuratively, the answer is yes.
Okay.
Because if you want to see, this comes back down to the point of accepting people where they are, and they're not wrong. It will bring consciousness to a certain level of understanding.
Okay.
So it's a tutor.
Okay.
To look at things, to have overseers, to have people oppressed. All of this is necessary until the root breaks the pot. All of it. So let me bring up one parable.
Okay.
That talks about the steward, and I've never heard anyone teach this parable.
Okay.
Because it doesn't make any sense. It's the parable of the unjust steward, where I'm just going to use modern lingo. The manager comes and sees, or the business owner comes and sees that the manager is squandering wealth.
Right.
And the business owner says, look, I see what you're doing, and you're going to be displaced from this job. Mark my words. So the business owner leaves, and the manager scrambles and thinks, uh-oh. So he calls in some receivables, and he says, hey, what do you owe the business owner? Well, I owe him for 90 gallons of oil. All right, make it 20. What do you owe? And he goes to the next person, and they say what they state, and he slashes that receivable, and he goes on down the line. So now the business owner returns. And James, what does he say?
When the business owner returned, he is, my mind went blank.
Okay, he says, well done.
Good, yeah.
So what business owner is going to come into a place of business where the manager has just given away the receivables? What business owner is going to come in and say, you did good?
Right.
So here's the parable, and here's the crux of the parable. You have been wise in the ways of the world, so that when you are dismissed from this position, you will be welcomed into eternal shelters. You have made for yourself friends. So what that tells me is the business manager is the ego.
Okay.
The ego is given the responsibility to forgive debt.
Yeah.
It's the part of the human being that in order for it to be dismissed from being in charge of the business at hand,
right,
must forgive debt. Wow. Forgive us our trespasses, forgive us our debt as we forgive our debtors. That is the job. That is the job of the ego in the ways of the world. And in so doing has made a passageway into the age to come.
Wow.
Because divinity needs a mechanism, the human mind, that can focus thought and emotion in order to create. That's our part of the bargain. That's our part of the synergy. But we cannot be an effective partner when we are moved according to selfish gain.
Yeah.
So it has to be surrendered. That's the dying on the cross. That's the surrendering of the self-life. That's the Christ riding the donkey into death. The ego becomes a willing partner of the divine. And it is then welcomed into eternal shelters. Now, this is what happens when we receive a divine unction. We check our ego and our judging between good and evil, and we say it is what it is. And we listen for those divine prompts. What would you like me to create for you today?
Yeah.
See that over there, focus on that, and provide the energy through what used to be judgment, that energy to create this circumstance. And I'll tell you something else. You know, Jesus, when he was told that Lazarus was dying, and they kept on prompting him and saying, you've got to come, you've got to come, you've got to come. It took him 4 days to walk 2 miles. What kind of friend is that? Anyway, he gets there and they say to him, he's dead.
Right.
Well, roll away the stone. But he stinks. You don't understand. He's been dead.
Right. 4 days now. Yeah.
You could have saved him. And Jesus said, you don't understand. I am the resurrection and the life.
Yeah.
Roll away the stone. So they rolled away the stone. And what did Jesus do? Did Jesus joyfully say, Lazarus, come on, buddy, come on up out of that grave? No, he did something profound. It says he groaned in his spirit. He called upon that emotional currency of grief that is very powerful, that he learned in his life, because it's our life.
Yeah.
And he called forth Lazarus from the dead. And he said this, Father, progenitor, source of all, thank you for hearing me just now.
Yeah.
What did he do? He groaned and he wept.
Yeah.
What did he do? He groaned and he wept. He groaned and he wept, but it's the language of vibration that issued a directive. And so he says, thank you, Father, for hearing me. You always hear me. And now I'm speaking these words now for them so that they understood what just happened between me and you.
Wow.
Lazarus, come forth. And Lazarus comes forth. And the thing of this story that is so profound is that we are Christ.
Yeah.
We are Lazarus that's being called forth. And we have the Father within.
Wow.
So emotion is important, but when it is tied to judgment, when we are looking at it according to an egocentric viewpoint, then we create with a lien on it that is tethered to the bank of this age. And we create mortally, limitedly, something that'll disease, decay, rot. But we are being primed to let go of our judgments, to focus our thought and emotion with love as our impetus. And we are beginning to create the bridge that will span the gulf between this age and the age to come.
Wow. I can see myself going over the replay to just this part and kind of sitting with this for a moment. That's powerful stuff, Barbara. Extremely powerful stuff.
And see that, to me, that single example of using grief to raise the dead.
Yeah.
Tells me that my grief.
Yeah.
My grief is necessary in my education. I have to be, my palette to create has to be full, the full spectrum of emotional currency.
Yeah.
So even the bad things, and it says of the Christ, he, the Christ, learned obedience through the pain he suffered.
Bring that out. Talk about that for a moment.
From what I understand, and this is what's coming to me, so this is what I'm going to say. Mm-hmm. When this grand experiment was brought to light in the cosmos, that there were beings, divine beings from all over the multiverse that petitioned for the privilege, the honor, the right to become human. Because in a physical format, contrasting experiences provide for the fastest education anywhere. To be physical, to be wrapped in the swaddling clothing of biology, provides us a form, a framework for us to feel pain.
Yeah.
How do we learn? You know, if we put our hand on a hot stove and it's joyful, do we learn not to put it there again? We learn through what we suffer. So in this classroom of duality, where we learn to judge between good and evil, remember, it's a requirement. Paul said, in order to go on to learn about Melchizedek, an immortal life, you have to be knowledgeable and discerning between good and evil.
Right.
Not wrong. No one should take that away from this talk here today. It's not wrong. But there comes a time where you have to leave it behind, just like it says in Hebrews chapter 5, and leaving behind even the principles of eternal punishment. Leave it behind. The principles of baptism, the elementary principles of faith toward God. Oh my God, leave that behind. What?
Right.
And when I was traveling in Hawaii on the back of a Harley Davidson, and I was questioning Spirit about that. I mean, aren't we supposed to have faith toward God? Isn't that like a requirement for all of this?
Right.
That still small voice said, the problem is in the word toward, because it applies that you are focusing outside of yourself to something else. So we have to experience this divine inversion that Jesus experienced. You know, the Old Testament, they carry around God on their shoulders and the Ark of the Covenant, and, you know, they've got the Holy of Holies and the, you know, everything that was in the tent. But then he comes along and says, inside. All inside.
Yeah. The kingdom of God is within you, right?
That's right. And so this education that we're getting here on planet Earth is teaching us the value of emotional currency and what it means, so that when we dismiss the human judgment aspect of it, when we can call upon grief, like Jesus did, when we can call upon that aspect, we can do things like raise the dead, but not when our judgment is tied, not when our creation is tied to judgment. Because judgment is an egocentric mode of being. The ego has to forgive the debt. No matter what happens, the guy that smashes your car, the one that steals from you, the ego must forgive the debt, because this is all a classroom. All of it. Every single bit of it. Every minute of every day is a classroom. The ego must forgive and transition that power, step down off the throne. And that's when divinity takes its rightful place, and you are a full-fledged God-man.
Wow.
To the world.
I love that. And I got to refer to Eckhart again. Eckhart talks about diminishing the self. And to some extent, a lot, you know, whenever you are feeling offended, or whenever the thought of offense comes or something like that, sitting with that, allowing that to be, and then that opens up a space for experiencing your true God self. Like it's almost like, you know, when Jesus says someone hits you on the right side, you turn the other cheek, because it opens up, you know, it makes you realize you can never be harmed, you can never be hurt, and now you're tapped into a part of you that you maybe didn't experience before, didn't know. You know, had never known before, which is the God force, the God power. Am I saying that correctly? Is that
absolutely? And this needs to be spoken. You know, the preachers and Paul, buffet the flesh, slay the carnal man, don't live according to the flesh, blah blah blah. That all has incredible merit, and it has to have its cross experience. The egocentric identity within man, the small I, the self, whatever you want to call it, the carnal man, all needs to have its death. But nobody talks about the resurrection of that aspect of us.
Mm.
A Christed being, and it is a partner, a full partner with the divine. So it doesn't stay in the ground. That's not the pattern. The pattern is resurrection as the servant. Just like Queen Esther. Remember, she was being prepared and she had been chosen.
Yeah.
The spouse, the queen, and she hears that Haman wants to kill her people
Right.
on the gallows, and she boldly goes in, and they warn her and they say, "Oh, you're going to be struck dead. You can't just go into him in those chambers." She boldly went in, and what did he do? He said, "Ask anything up to half of my kingdom."
Yeah. Yeah.
That's our portion as human beings that have yielded to the process of becoming Emmanuel, or God-men. That's our estate. That's our inheritance.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
That is extremely powerful. Now, I want to kind of move along and get into what you talk about when you say fulfilling. You know, you talk about fulfilling our mission, and and you're kind of alluding to a little bit of it here. You talked about in one of your teachings or one of your videos, you talked about your son after a terrible motorcycle accident where he was in danger, or where he lost his arm and his leg. And correct me if I any part of the story I don't have right. That you had an out-of-body experience where you also heard a voice speak to you saying that we chose, or that this is what you chose and this is what your son chose. And is that correct? Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Talk about that. So based on what I hear, based on what you heard, am I to understand that a person chooses things like abuse or cancer or homelessness, molestation? Am I to understand that people are, it's hard for a lot of people to grasp that. How does that reconcile? You know, what is the value in living that kind of existence where I'm choosing that experience?
It's a very hard thing to hear. And I wouldn't presume to say those things if I felt I didn't earn the right to say it.
Okay.
And the way that I earned the right was from going through the experience. But I'm only repeating what I heard.
Yeah.
And for me, I know that it was absolutely true, and for many others. So in the emergency waiting room, my mind was racing way ahead because I was wondering, he's missing his left arm and his left leg. How is he going to use a crutch if he doesn't have an arm on the left? I was thinking, trying to rationalize and just projecting way out ahead. And in Houston, there's a hospital, leading trauma center, Memorial Hermann Hospital, and I was in the waiting room. There's this huge saltwater tank in there. And as I was looking at the fish tank, I started feeling funny, kind of a little fuzzy, dizzy. And my feet didn't feel firm on terra firma. It felt like I was kind of like maybe standing on a waterbed or something. And I heard the voice say, "Barbara, you must remember that he chose this, and so did you." Now, immediately I felt back on the ground. My feet were firm beneath me.
Yeah.
And I was saying, "No, he didn't. No, I didn't. That's silly. Who would think that? Who would have a thought like that?"
Right.
But as I was arguing, I was giving credence to even having heard what I heard.
Right.
Trying to justify, well, no, that's not right. And then the voice continued and it said, "Yes, from before the foundation." When you were made known the mysteries. And so I kind of equate that to Mary. You will become impregnated with something holy and divine. It's like something played out outside of our concept of time, where we chose certain experiences, and this is key, not based on the knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah.
Clearly, we're not incarnated, and we're not thinking according to the egocentric mind. We are not incarnate.
Right.
A place where we know things.
Yeah.
So we make decisions based on purpose.
Right.
And what we as individuated aspects of the I am wanting to experience to complete our palette of emotion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now, and I've said this, and this is a hard thing to hear, but we all need that palette. We need the black. We need the brown. We need the deep violet. We need all of those things all the way to white in order to create adeptly. Remember, Jesus used grief
Right.
to bring about raising the dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
He had grief that day during that accident. I'm familiar with grief.
Yeah.
So in the age to come, it doesn't look like what it looks like now. We will have this beautiful, full, emotional account, an external account where we take our valuable experiences and we will pull them into this place where what we think and what we say and how we focus will be without the restriction of time. Right now, there's a gap in between thought and manifestation.
Right.
We're not under the tutorship of time. Time just serves us. It's here for us to allow an environment of learning. So the voice went on and it said to me, it said from before the foundation, you chose this before you were eating from the tree that knows between good and evil. All you saw was purpose. And it went on to say, there is no human suffering in vain. So that speaks of the baby that dies in the womb and that brings a family together or brings grief.
Yeah.
We are continually presented with hurdles to come over. And at the end of the day, before the steward is released from his job, it must forgive. And that means everything. Everything.
Yeah.
What it is, and it served me no matter what it was. And that is forgiveness. It's not whether you're stolen from or beaten or whatever. It's the whole of it. Is we get it and we understand that this has been our education on planet Earth. And every single aspect, when Jesus, the Christ, us experience grief, we can still call upon that and use it. And we see, just as in the story, it served Jesus then.
And what does it serve in that it creates a contrast? In other words, I know what I want because I know what I don't want. Does the grief, in a sense, kind of, okay, this experience of Lazarus dying is something that's so emotional for me that it points me in the direction of what I do want, and I can create from that place? Or is that accurate, or where am I missing something?
I'm sure it can. I think the whole point of that story is that we understand that we are the Christ.
Right.
We are also Lazarus. And
Okay.
Those contrasting experiences that we've had and raise this framework from the dead. Because that's where we are, James.
Yeah.
We're walking dead.
Yeah.
And we have to reach a tipping point to where the odds are in our favor to create this vibrational link between this age and the next.
Sure.
It has to come with people that are awakening and understanding the necessity to stop judging. And those people that stop judging between good and evil will compromise the fabric of this reality enough to cause this reality to unravel.
Wow. Now let's shift to the mind. Let's talk about the mind, because obviously the shift has to take place in the mind. Now, before we came on, I told you that in a kind of a roundabout way, weird way, my journey to awakening started with studying the brain, studying how the brain. It wasn't no spiritual book, whatever. I just felt intuitively led to study the brain, and Joe Dispenza. I read his book, cover to cover, studied it, went real in depth to it. So you talk about the right and left hemisphere, and you expressed an idea that I had never even considered, but I found very profound. You refer to the right and left hemisphere of the brain as the feminine and masculine, and when they come together, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Christ child is born. Do I have that correct? And if so, explain that a little bit.
Yes, and it's not physiological as much as it is in consciousness.
Okay.
And that is the part of us that is the womb, that is able to construct and build a human, even metaphorically anything, needs to yield to the masculine energy.
Okay.
And the masculine energy in this case will never force itself upon the female.
Right.
If it does, that's the pattern that we see as rape.
Yeah.
That's not divinity. So it's sufficient to understand that the masculine and feminine energies are within every single one of us. Right now, we are played out in division as male and female.
Mm-hmm.
But each one of us has the masculine and feminine within themselves. And as that union begins to take place, that's what births the Christ nature, because Christ is an amalgamation of the divine and the human.
Okay.
It is divinity walking inside of and inhabiting biology, able to find expression and manifestation in material worlds. Remember, going back to Carl Sagan, if you want to bake an apple pie, you got to first create the universe. If you want to have expression in the material domains, and remember that divinity is just energy. That's all it is energy, powerful energy that did not have expression in material domains.
Right.
So it created matter, the building blocks of matter, and found a means to create and to pull quantum bits of material together. And it's done through thought.
Yeah.
Emotion.
Yeah.
And so it found a way to have expression in the material world by putting itself inside of.
Right. And now when I hear you say that, I think about, when I think about the masculine, the feminine submitting to the masculine, I think about the Adam and Eve story. And you could say, James, you're far off on this, but it just sparks my mind when God said that the female would look to, her desire would be toward her husband, which is interpreted as you will look to control your husband, but he will rule over you. Is that kind of the same thing where or am I thinking maybe subconscious or emotions will look to overpower the conscious mind, but the conscious mind is to have control over your emotions? Where am I going with that? I have no idea.
No, it's good. No, this is something that we have to pay really close attention to.
Okay.
There's the least bit of confusion in an interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
It's because we've been taught what those words mean in error.
Okay.
We've been taught according to dogma.
Right.
So I have a friend whose name is Lynn Hayes.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody out there needs to get a hold of this man, his teaching, his CDs. I can provide the link for this to get his teaching, but he teaches gematria, or the numerical value of the Hebrew glyphs. They are divine and packed full of information that will totally shift what we think those words meant.
Okay.
In the beginning, that's not what it said. It's in principle. So a lot of these things, kind of going around the block here, have not been interpreted correctly, and we've got some dogma hanging on some hooks that really shouldn't be there.
Gotcha.
But the key there is if you find yourself questioning something or something doesn't quite make sense, it's always because there's some kind of dogma hanging on the hook on the back of that door that needs to come down.
Sure. Let's talk about Jesus for a moment. We shared this. I knew this, and you shared this when we spoke, that a lot of the Jesus story, or what we attributed to Jesus, happened centuries, almost millions of years ago with Egypt, and like it's almost like it keeps repeating itself, and it's now attributed to Jesus, the virgin birth, and all that kind of stuff. Is Jesus a myth? Was he an actual person?
I can tell you who he is to me.
Okay.
And it's me. The story, first of all, the letter J wasn't even in use until the 1500s, so we don't even have the name right. The Jesus story, really what it is, it's about the coming and the dying and the resurrecting God-man.
Mm-hmm.
And that myth or story, allegory, history, whatever you want to call it, has been around in many cultures, as you said. The Sumerian, the Emerald Tablets, the Egyptian mythology, Horus, Attis, Mithras. They all say the same story, and it's more tightly in common than what we think. But it's all about the coming of and the dying and the resurrecting God-man.
Okay.
That's us. It's us.
Right.
So in all of our myths and cultures, we have a story and we have rituals. It happened to Attis and Horus and Buddha about being tempted in a jungle or a wilderness or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And being faced for 40 days and 40 nights, being tempted of, the great adversary. We personify, anthropomorphize Satan, which we shouldn't. So we have all of these myths in common, but they all point to the same story.
Yeah.
That is our story. And the planet, I'll get a little woo-woo out there for just a minute. The planet, our solar system and our universe provides us with a measurement of time of course, nanoseconds, seconds, minutes, hours, weeks, days, weeks, months, years. But there's another measurement of time called the great year. And
okay.
It's a 24,000 year cycle. And in this 24,000 year cycle, we live and die, and live and die, and live and die, and live and die. We are actually come in 24,000 years at a very high culture, the Golden Ages.
Mm-hmm.
Plato talked about the Golden Ages.
Right.
Great thinkers, talked and knew about the Golden Ages, where people flew on magic carpets and walked through walls, and there was very little that limited their existence here. But then they were lowered into what we now know as the Dark Ages.
Yeah.
They were immortal, 900, 1,000 more years lifespan at the Golden Ages, and then they were slowly lowered into futility, like the scripture said. The creature was made subject to futility, not willingly, but by the one who subjected it in hope. So
right.
The grand experiment of this divine being coming in, occupying flesh and blood, but being lowered in vibration until lifespans were only 23 years long in the Dark Ages. And in the Dark Ages, we forgot everything.
Mm.
We even thought that we were a part of that we were Earth-centric rather than heliocentric, which means we thought that the sun revolved around the Earth. But we had the knowledge back 6,000 years ago, but we lost a lot of our information and our knowledge because we went through that darkness. We were baptized into dense human consciousness going through this great year. coming up and coming around now, coming out of the dark ages and heading towards the golden ages again. So it's all, every bit of it is purposeful.
Gotcha.
And there's so much more than what we've been taught. But the learning is out there for the asking. There are answers everywhere, just waiting for the questions to be asked. And we don't have to learn gematria. We don't have to study, Hebrew and Greek and Aramaic, and it is so simple. If you take a journey out to your back porch and you meditate for 15 minutes and you ask the questions, the answers will come.
I absolutely believe that and agree with that. Speaking of learning, what can we learn from your book, Escaping Christianity, Finding Christ?
I just put my journey down. It was real cathartic for me.
Mm-hmm.
I was also told, I went to Sedona with a friend of mine back in 2008 and listened to a man give a talk on the vortices, the energy centers that are present there. I think there's 7 or 8 of them.
Yeah.
And he said, he looked down in the audience and he pointed at me and he said, "Would you stay after I'm done talking?" And I said, "Okay." Well, to make a long story short, he raced up to me and my friend that was with me after we were done with listening to him talk. And he said, "Hey, do you write?" I said, "Well, a little bit here and there. I'm thinking about writing a book." And he said, "Write a book." He said, "You need to write, you need to write, and you need to write. I'm telling you, giving you this divine directive that you need to write and you will impact millions."
Wow.
And so I don't know if this is that book, but it was my journey up to that point. And the book also talks about what we have not talked about at all today, and that's stepping into the Melchizedek order.
Okay.
It's a big story and it's a good story, but it culminates in understanding that aspect of who we are.
Yeah, that means we might have to bring you back. I want you to talk about this briefly, and then we're gonna close out. Is there a real Satan? Or who is Satan?
Absolutely. Funny, I was just talking about that this morning with a friend of mine.
Okay.
What I have come to understand, that Satan is a principle.
A principle
that rules the background of creation. It is an adversary to spirit, not an enemy, an adversary. It will create from the directives issued forth from God.
Right.
To whatever vibrational standard it is measured out with. If it is measured out with an egocentric vibration, selfishness, it will create a mortal world, and does. It's a principle that rules the background of creation. And it's an adversary to spirit. And while we are egocentric, it will continue to create the world around us.
Okay.
And now that adversary tempts us. Hey, wouldn't we like this, or wouldn't we like that? So it's a struggle to let that aspect of us die, that is carnal, that is self, that is, all those lower things, in favor of choosing love. And love unconditional. And so it's just this cosmic struggle between the ego and between the divine, and that's all it is.
I like that.
But for someone who wants to really understand that, get a book called The Third Millennium.
The Third Millennium.
By Ken Carey, Kencarey.
Okay.
A book that was written in the late 80s, early 90s, chapter 4.
Okay.
Found understanding that he has of this principle that we have anthropomorphized, we have made it external from ourselves and created a being out of it.
Right.
Given it stasis so that it can stand before Job. We've ascribed human attributes when really all it is, it's a principle that's inside of us. The universe is inside of us that creates and maintains the world as we know it. And it is Satan when it is creating according to the ego.
Awesome. Now, in conclusion, I want you to answer these questions in as succinctly, the shortest answer as possible.
Is that possible?
we're gonna try. Who is God?
Oh, he's a beautiful African American man that I'm looking at right now.
I love it. I love it. We're gonna keep going. Is that's your story? That's what you're sticking with?
It's the truth.
You're right. You're right. You're right. Okay, what is love?
The highest vibration in this octave. The highest vibration in this octave, and the lowest in the next.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, we need to bring you back because I want to explore that. What does the world need?
Oh, love, non-judgment, compassion. That's when the Christ manifests, and the miraculous is through compassion. Remember the stories? He was with compassion.
I love that. And the last one is, what do you know for sure?
That love wins.
Yeah, I love that. Barbara, I absolutely love you. I love this. This gives me an opportunity to kind of go back through this and kind of just sit with this. I thank you. As I told you, you are a mentor to me without you even knowing it. And I definitely want to have you back because there's more that you talked about that I want to explore. But I thank you. I thank you. I thank you. Is there anything that you want to share before I actually close out?
I'm good. I've said enough.
I want you to hold on. I'm going to close this out, but I want you to hold on because I want to talk to you offline for a while. Thank you, everyone who tuned in. Thank you for, I usually try to keep it within an hour, but this was just too powerful. This was just too rich. I hope that you stay with me in my journey with Barbara and her journey. And I hope to see you and hear from you all soon. I love you all, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.